Yeah.
Really? Okay.
It was super hot. Test 1, 2, test 2, 2. That didn't sound too bad. Test
Start
2.
it off low and we'll work up. If we
Test
have
1,
to.
2. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, good morning, church. Hope everybody is enjoying the cold this morning. I'm a pretty big baby about the cold, but I think it felt pretty good. So we're going to go into a time of worship together. So if you guys want to stand on up, and we'll get started. It's shining in the light of your glory. So pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. So open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. And open the eyes of my heart, Lord. So open the eyes. shining in the light of your glory. So pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. So pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. Oh, holy, holy, holy. Oh, holy, holy, holy. Oh, holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. You are holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. I want to see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. So pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. So pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. You're worthy of every song we could ever sing. You're worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. You're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead in your love to those around me. Oh, your goodness is running out, it's running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now, I give everything. Oh, your goodness is running out, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I breathe, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. God, right now we just want to come before you and just say we are so thankful for your goodness in our lives, for your mercy in our lives, for your peace, for your joy. God, we thank you for your spirit in this room right now with us. We thank you for the countless miracles that you've provided for the people in this building right now, the countless miracles you've provided for this church. And we just want to say you are so, so good. We're so thankful. We love you and we praise you in your holy name. Amen. All right, you guys can go ahead and greet one another. Say hey to somebody you haven't seen.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. All right. Super. I am Kirsty Garrity, and I help out with the communications here at BPC. And I just have a couple announcements for you guys today. First of all, if you didn't grab a bulletin when you walked in, please grab one on your way out. It's full of great information. Everything I'm going to announce today obviously is in here, but just it's always a great resource for what's going on at BPC, how you can get involved, and kind of what the important highlights are. Okay, so this might be a surprise for you guys, but my household is obsessed with numbers. My husband does math for a living. My daughter's learning how to count to 10, so that's exciting. And I love countdowns. So, for example, my husband's birthday is 29 days away. Our due date in March is 156 days away, which is much closer than anybody might think it is. And then coming up in 80 days is Christmas. So, I know, it's wild. Which I think around Christmas time, we do a good job about planning joy for ourselves and how we can plan joy for our family and what that looks like. But this Christmas season, I want to encourage you guys to think about Operation Christmas Child, which you've probably heard about before here at BPC. It's one of our supported missions partners, and they take these boxes, fill them with goodies for children around the world, and ship them off and spread joy and the gospel for kids who might not have the opportunity to hear it. So this year at BPC, we are planning on filling 1,000 of these boxes. Last year, yeah, we can do it. Last year we did 900, so it's not too far off. But there are a few ways you can get involved, one of which would be take a box today. We have some out in the lobby. You can fill it with the provided list of items, and then bring it back in November. And then we ship it off, and we spread joy. Another way would be to join us for our packing party on November 10th. We get festive. It's a great opportunity to just, again, spread joy, be happy, be festive. And that is, I believe, after the second service on November 10th. So consider getting involved. It's a great way. And yeah. My next announcement is for our new members class. This is a 2-part class that actually starts today. If you haven't registered, you're not too late. You can still register. You can just show up to the classrooms on the south side after second service, and we'd love to have you. Becoming a member is so much more than just being able to vote on important items. It's really a public declaration of, becoming a member of your church and your church community, and creating that foundation for what we do, the efforts that we have in the community, and just being a representative of BPC. So we would love to see you there. If you're not a member, consider joining us today after second service, and then it's also next Sunday after second service as well. So that's all I have, and I'm going to invite Jason up.
Thank you, Kirsty. All right. How are we doing? Good morning. Welcome. We're glad to have you guys here. We're glad you've taken your time out on Sunday morning. It's been a beautiful fall. It's hard to say this is fall. I know it doesn't officially happen right till the 21st, which passed. I know it's October. I'm aware. Yeah, it's been amazing. Hey, we're in the book of Daniel. 2,500-year-old document, so pretty challenging to walk through. And I'm sure a lot of you spend a lot of time in the book of Daniel, right? Do you? Maybe not. Some of you may not even know what this book of Daniel is about. And we're about to go deep into a story of Daniel and his friends. And let me give the context for this. If you want to turn there, you can grab a Bible. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 2. But the story of Daniel is a story about a group of young men, 5 in particular, that are taken away from their homeland in Judea, in the city of Jerusalem, by the Babylonians. Babylonians come in, they destroy the city of Jerusalem, they destroy the temple where the people worshiped, and they take these 5 individuals, including Daniel, off into captivity. And the story of Daniel is about how do we live in a culture that does not support our faith or our values in God. And Daniel's in this space where it'd be very easy just to kind of give up, to go with the culture, to give up his values, and essentially just to become a Babylonian and live the way of Babylon and trust the ways of Babylon. But instead, Daniel resists. He resists. And the question we're asking as we go through this is, what does long-term faithfulness to God look like? How do we live faithful to God? In a culture and in a context today that probably doesn't encourage our discipleship to Jesus. What does it look like to live in our culture today in a way that reflects faithfulness to God? And really, how do we hold on to that faithfulness? In a culture that's trying to get your attention in all different directions. And one of those directions that it's trying to get your attention in today is the area of politics. And that's really why we're in the book of Daniel, if you're ready for this. It's because the book of Daniel unearths, it unmasks the powers of the world and the political powers and the kingdoms of this world. And it shows that they're not primary. They're not of first importance. And so what does it look like to follow Jesus in a world that's really concerned about political power? It doesn't mean those things are unimportant or we shouldn't be involved, but how do we remain faithful to God, faithful to Jesus in a world that's constantly leading us to a different devotion and to a different direction? You ready for that? Well, before we do this, we're going to get in Daniel chapter 2, and it's a beautiful story. This is one of the best stories in Daniel 2 in the entire Old and New Testament, but it's quite long. And before we do that, I want to open up with this legend that I read this week. And it's a legend about a young man. This young man was hiking through a valley. It was a beautiful valley. He looks up and he sees this majestic mountain. And he decides to climb up to this mountain peak. And as he's hiking up, he eventually reaches the top and he marvels at what he sees. He sees the vista and he's quite proud, and his heart is filled with pride. And then as he is at the top of this mountain, he hears a sound at his feet. And as he looks down, he sees a snake. And the snake says to him, "It's cold. It's freezing up here. There's no food. I'm about to die. Please put me under your shirt and take me down into the valley." Well, the young man paused. He considered this request, and he said to the snake, "No, I know you're kind. You're a rattlesnake. If I pick you up, you'll bite me, and I will surely die. I can't carry you down the mountainside." And the snake pleaded. He said, No. You're right. I've bitten many people. But if you're kind to me, I'll treat you differently. You will be special. I would never harm you. Well, the young man considered the request, and eventually he agreed. He picked up the snake, tucked it under his shirt, carried him down the mountainside. And when he got to the bottom, down in the green valley, he set the snake down in the grass, and the snake coiled, and he leaped, and he bit the young boy. And the boy cried, "You promised. You said I was special. You said I was different. You would never turn against me." And the snake replied, "You knew what I was before you picked me up." Now, what does that have to do? What does that have to say to us today? And the answer is, trust what you know to be true. Trust what you know to be true. And what we know to be true from Daniel chapter 2, we're going to discover this, and what we know from human history, and what we see to be true from human history, is that unquestioned allegiance, unquestioned devotion to temporal political leaders, even unquestioned devotion to a nation or a kingdom is detrimental to the way of Jesus. Now, we're going to prove that, but let me say that again. What we know to be true is unquestioned devotion and allegiance to a temporal political leader or even to a nation or a kingdom or an empire is detrimental to the way of Jesus. Because when it comes to Jesus, he said a lot of striking statements about what it means to be faithful to him. On the one hand, in Mark chapter 2, Jesus said, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and render to God the things that are God's." So give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but give to God what belongs to God, which means simply don't give Caesar the allegiance that belongs to God. That our devotion to God has to be primary. Nothing else can be put alongside that. And then it gets even more stark in contrast in Luke chapter 14. Jesus said, "If anyone would come to me," if you guys want to pull those verses up, "if anyone would come to me," Luke 14:26, "if anyone come to me and does not hate his own father and mother, and his wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." That's a pretty strong statement. Now, is Jesus calling us to hate our father and mother? Of course not. Your father and mother, that's the primary relationship from which we get our identity, how we move out into the world. He's not saying that we should hate our husband or our wife or our children, but he's saying your devotion to me, your love for me, your focus on me should be so primary that every other relationship would seem like hate. And so let's kind of take that verse and put it in a new context. And let's look at it this way. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own nation, can we say that? His own political party, his own candidate, he cannot be my disciple. What is he saying? That our allegiance to Jesus has to be primary. And if anything else starts to creep up, starts to come alongside, we have to identify that. And that's what Daniel chapter 2 is going to tell us. It's going to show us what happens to God's people when the nation becomes primary, when political power becomes the way that we solve the things that God wants to bring about. Now, let me share with you a little bit about what chapter 2 is, because it's incredibly long. We can't read the entire thing. We'll spend the whole time simply reading chapter 2, which is a great story, and I encourage you to do that. But here's what chapter 2 is about. Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon, and he's going to wake up grumpy. All right? And when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, wakes up grumpy, people die. Because that's what Babylon does. It kills people. Nebuchadnezzar wakes up grumpy, and he says to his wise men and wise women out there, and he says, listen, I just had a terrible dream. I want you to interpret my dream for you. And they're like, oh, great. Well, why don't you tell us the dream, King Nebuchadnezzar? And Nebuchadnezzar says, no, I'm not going to tell you the dream. You need to tell me the dream, and you need to tell me the interpretation of the dream, because that way I know you're not messing with me, right? And the wise men and wise women, they're like, listen, we can't do that. We can't tell you your dream and the interpretation of the dream. You got to tell us, what did you dream about? And he said, no, that's it. If you can't do this, I'm going to kill all the wise men and magicians and all the soothsayers, because that's what grumpy people do when they wake up grumpy, right? They just kill people. Now, the challenge with this is Daniel, which we introduced you to in the beginning of this story. Daniel's a part of that wise community now. He's been in Babylon for 3+ years. And he's risen up to this position of leadership. So when the king says, I'm going to kill all the wise men, that includes Daniel and all his friends. And Daniel doesn't like that idea of being killed. So he says, wait a minute, king. Listen, let me go to my God. I'm going to go to my God, and I'm going to pray that he would reveal to me the dream and the interpretation of the dream. And so that's what we're about to jump into. We're going to come into the middle of the story in verse 19 and 20, as Daniel has received this interpretation from God. He and his friends spent all night praying, because when your life's on the line, you spend all night praying. God, you got to give us some help. You got to give us some guidance. Show us what this dream is and show us the interpretation of this dream. So they stay up all night, and then in verses 19 and 20, we're going to pick it up. You guys ready for this? Daniel chapter 2, verse 19, we're going to pick up the interpretation of this dream. Here we go. Verse 19. And then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision in the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven, and Daniel answered, and he said, now, let me pause. We're going to talk a little bit as we go through this. Verses 20 through 23 are poetry. The reason that poetry is put in a narrative like this is to slow us down. Poetry often tells you what the main idea of the story is. That's why he's breaking it down and slowing down. So when we read this poetry, let's start to see what are the themes that this dream's going to reveal. Here we go. Verse 20. Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belongs all wisdom and all might. God is the one who changes times and seasons. He removes kings and he sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep things, hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and all the light dwells with him. To you, O God, God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might. You have now made known to me what I've asked of you, for you have made known to me the matter of the king. God, you've revealed this dream to me. So here's the question. Who has all wisdom and all power and all might? According to this psalm, this poetry, it's God. And who set Nebuchadnezzar in place? Where's your power come from, Nebuchadnezzar? Where's your authority come from? God sets kings in place and he takes them away. This is a dream both for Nebuchadnezzar, but it's also for Daniel, to remind Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar is not going to last. It's temporary. He's powerful. He's great. He's going to be described in this dream as a golden statue, if you know this story. That Daniel's going to rehearse this dream. He's going to say, Nebuchadnezzar, you're a great king. You're actually the king of kings, which is quite a fascinating phrase. And you're powerful, and you have all this great potential, and you are a head of gold, and there's this massive statue that represents the kingdoms of this world. You're great and powerful, but your time is limited, and God one day will judge all that you've done. So let's jump back in the story, verse 24. Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king who had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. And he went and said to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show him the interpretation. Then the king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? And Daniel answered the king, and he said, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to the king, King Nebuchadnezzar, what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions in your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this, meaning what would be after your kingdom. And he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be, what's coming. But as for me, this mystery has been also revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have, more than any of the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to you, to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. Here's what you saw, verse 31. You saw, O king, and behold, there was this great image, and some translations have statue. This great image, this great statue that was mighty and of exceeding brightness, and it stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. Now the head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and its arms of silver, the middle and thighs were of bronze, its legs were of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. And as you looked at the statue, a stone was cut out by no human hands, and this stone, it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and it broke them all into tiny pieces. And then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken into pieces. And it became like chaff on the summer threshing floor, and the wind just chased them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone, that very stone that struck the image, became a great and mighty mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. To you, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hands he has given whatever they dwell, the children of men, the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are that head of gold. I imagine that made him just a little less grumpy. That's great. I'm the head of gold. But his mood's going to change. Verse 39. Because another kingdom and king is coming who's inferior to you. And he'll rise up after you. And then after that kingdom, a third kingdom is going to come, which is of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. As you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with soft clay. And as the toes and the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so this kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage. But they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in those days of the king, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another. It shall break into pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end. It shall stand forever, just as you saw that the stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, that it broke into pieces the iron and the bronze and the clay and the silver and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. This dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. Now realize, Daniel's taking that on faith. He's kind of like, is this your dream? I sure hope so. Verse 46, and then King Nebuchadnezzar, right, he fell on his face, and he paid homage to Daniel, and he commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. And the king answered and said to Daniel, truly, your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many gifts, and made him ruler of the whole province of Babylon, the chief prefect over the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel made a request to the king, and he appointed Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. That is a crazy story, right? It's amazing. Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. And what's this dream about? This is where we're going to spend some time. And if you guys can pull up that image for a moment. This is just a suggestion of what it might have looked like. And it talked about different kingdoms. And it says there was an image. Nebuchadnezzar, you dreamt of an image. And that image was made of gold. And you see the gold at the head, and then you see the silver and the bronze. And the legs that were made of iron. Then it gets into this crazy description about iron and clay, mixing, marrying, all of that together. And what that image represents is human kingdoms. And it starts off with gold, because gold's pretty promising, isn't it? Gold looks beautiful. He's like, listen, Nebuchadnezzar, you're promising. You have so much opportunity, so much that God's given you to rule over, to be faithful with. But after you is going to come another kingdom. And after that kingdom is going to come another kingdom. And after that kingdom is going to come another kingdom. And eventually this rock. And he talks about this rock. Remember that rock you saw in your dream? He's like, yeah, I remember that. How nobody picked up the rock with human hands, but it just appeared, and that rock came down, it smashed the feet of that image. And what happened to the image? It all fell apart. The gold, the bronze, the iron, even though it looked strong and majestic, it all crumbled down. And this rock that broke the statue, eventually it becomes this mighty mountain, this kingdom that will last forever. That's the story that he's showing Nebuchadnezzar. And there's a couple of ideas that are coming out of this. One, Nebuchadnezzar, you're not that big a deal. We need to tell some of our leaders that. Hey, you're not that big a deal. I know you think you're a pretty big deal. I know you think you're powerful and you're great, but your time is going to come. And there is a King of Kings who has set you in place. And I know you think you arrived there on your own power, but God has given you authority, and God has set you in place. And he set you in place for a reason, which is to care for all the people that God's entrusting to you. So he's saying on the one hand, Nebuchadnezzar, listen, you're not that big a deal. And all human leaders need to hear that. And I need to hear that. Jason, you're not that big a deal. Listen, I love you and I care for you and I've given you gifts and talents and abilities and I want to work through you, but you're not that big a deal. And it's also saying to Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar's not that big a deal. Don't worry about what he's up to. It matters. It's important. The way we organize, the way we lead, all of that matters. But don't give him power and authority that's greater than who he is. Trust that God is still at work. And you follow the King of Kings, you follow the Lord of Lords, you follow the one who has set the kings in place. But there's some images in this story that are really important, and I want to pull these out for you and kind of connect it to where we are today, because you're like, what in the world does this have to do with us, right? Well, I'll share this with you. There's a few images in this story that have echoes back to older stories in the Bible. And the echoes come from words like, and he saw an image. He saw a statue. And then under that description of the statue, it says this statue was representing these kingdoms. And Nebuchadnezzar, your purpose was to rule over the people, over men and women, over children, but also to rule over the beasts of the field. Did you hear that language? And the birds of the air. Well, see, all of this is Genesis language. Image. Image is the word in Hebrew, selim, that you and I were created in the selim of God. And when Nebuchadnezzar's dreaming, he's dreaming of a selim, an image, a statue. And the statue represents the kingdoms of the world, but it also represents humanity. You and I are created in the image of God. And part of being created in the image of God is to rule over the things he's entrusted us with. So let's jump back to Genesis chapter 1 and bring in some of the language that informs this dream that then is going to lead us to an interpretation of how you and I are supposed to be faithful today. We're going to travel all that distance in a short time. You ready for this? So Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. And so God created man, and here's that word, right? In his image. When Nebuchadnezzar's dreaming, he sees an image. And so God creates us in this image. In the image of God, he created us. And he created us male and female. And God blessed them, and he said to them, be fruitful, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the ground. You and I were created to rule on God's behalf, out of God's character, out of his goodness, and to care for things in a way that represents who God is. We are the image of God. God has given us that responsibility. But he's also given to others the responsibility of organizing communities and cities and nations. And when those people are put in place, they're not supposed to rule however they want, in whatever manner they want. They're supposed to rule in a way that reflects God's character. Does that make sense? Just as you and I are created to have money and life and community and families, we're supposed to rule over those things in ways that reflect God's character. Likewise, the kings and the presidents of the earth are supposed to rule over what's been entrusted to them in a way that reflects God's character. But what happens when men and women get into positions of power over time? Have you seen this? Have you experienced this in your life? There's a reason they say absolute power corrupts absolutely, because we've seen it time and time again. And Daniel, through this dream, is saying to Nebuchadnezzar, God has given you so much potential. And listen, he's saying that to you too. He's created you in the image of God to reflect his character. And in creation is all of this raw material. People and places and things that we get to work with. And out of that, we get to bring something beautiful that should reflect God's character in the way that he rules and reigns. But what happens with Nebuchadnezzar is he wakes up grumpy one day and people start to die. Because that's what Babylon tends to do. That power begins to corrupt. And instead of serving people in a way that reflects God's character, that loves people, cares for them, shepherds them, leads them, what happens is it starts to become ugly, and it starts to turn in on itself, and it gets distorted. And we see how human kingdoms have these great beginnings, and yet they fall off. And those leaders find too much, pride in themselves or pride in their own glory, and this evil begins to come out of them. And when evil starts to come out of your leaders, what comes out of us? Evil. The evil in our leaders affects the evil in our communities, and all of that begins to trickle down, and the image of God in us begins to get distorted, and we don't treat people the way that we should. We don't love creation the way that we should. And we see this breakdown in relationships. It's dangerous. It's dangerous when God's people put their allegiance in kingdoms that are made of clay. Now, let me pause there. I love my nation. I don't want to think of my nation as being smashed by a rock, right? I value the process that we have. I value democracy. I want to be engaged. I want to vote. I want to have a choice. All of those things are good. But when God's people put their allegiance in those things, that's the nature of compromise. That's what Daniel's saying. That's what God's saying to Daniel. Daniel, the reason you need to be faithful to me is when you put your allegiance in Nebuchadnezzar and the systems of this world, it's going to break down. Because they don't reflect me and they're not reflecting the way that I would do things. And one day this rock's going to come. And when this rock comes, all that these kingdoms have built that doesn't reflect me, what's going to happen to it, guys? What's going to happen to Colorado? What's going to happen to the United States? He's saying those kingdoms are eventually going to fall. And anything that doesn't reflect me, it's not going to stand. Do you see that? Can we apply that to our own place? When you know something's temporary, you treat it as temporary. And it doesn't have as great a hold on your heart. So what's this dream revealing to us today? It's revealing to us that human kingdoms come and go. And verse 44, if you jump back to it, eventually this rock, and we're going to talk about what that rock is going to come. And we need to unpack this a little bit because it sounds very violent when a rock comes and smashes these kingdoms, right? It's pretty violent, and they all fall in little pieces. And we're going to discover what that rock really looks like. Verse 44, and in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall this kingdom be left to another people. It shall break, right? This rock's going to come. It's going to break all these kingdoms into pieces and bring them to an end. But this kingdom that comes out of this rock, it's going to stand forever. Now, here's what's fascinating. The book of Daniel was incredibly important to Jesus. Now, how do we know that? The primary title he used to describe himself was called the Son of Man. Did you notice that? The primary way he described himself was Son of Man. Son of Man language comes from the book of Daniel. So his main identity, his way of seeing himself as a king, the way he understands the way the kingdom of God is moving into the world comes from the book of Daniel. But the book of Daniel is pretty important if you're an oppressed people group. Because in Jesus' day, where were the Jewish people? Not under Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. They're now under Rome. So Nebuchadnezzar's gone, just like the dream said, and now this new power has come. And if you're a Jew under the oppression of Rome, what do you want to do? What do you want? You want a violent revolt. I want to be the Rock. I want to be Dwayne Johnson, right? I want to come in and smash the kingdoms of Rome. I want it to be brought down. And that's what was inspired. It's called the Maccabean story. I don't know if you know that in the history of the Jews. Or later on, there was revolts. And all of them would go back to Daniel chapter 2. And they'd say, hey, guys, do you think it's time? Do you think we're the rock? Do you think we can bring the rock in and smash this kingdom and cause the kingdoms to fall? And what would happen? They would rise up in revolt. And they would attack. And sometimes they'd be successful, but after that revolt, did anything really change? Has the world gotten better? No. It's just the same thing over and over and over again. And so when Jesus shows up and he's got this vision of Daniel in his mind, he knows he's the king. And he comes into Jerusalem. Do you remember that scene? It's called Palm Sunday. Jesus comes into Jerusalem and he's riding on a donkey. And everyone's hailing him as king. You're the Messiah. You're Daniel chapter 2. You're the rock. You're going to make these things right. And then he comes into the city, and what are the people expecting? Expecting him to crush the statue, to bring it all to little pieces. And what does he do? He starts healing the sick. He starts healing the eyes of the blind. He addresses the injustice in the temple. He turns over the tables. Now, the reason he turns over the tables is those are the tables of the poor. And the religious leaders were taking advantage of the people they should have been there to serve and to bring into God's presence. And Jesus starts to address all these things, and the people become really frustrated because they're saying, Jesus, this is not how you lead a revolution. This isn't how you change the world. We want violence. We want you to wipe out the Romans, and what eventually happens? Well, the night before Jesus is betrayed, he's with his disciples, and this is what he says in John 16. He's looking at his disciples, and he says this, I say these things to you, that in me you may have peace. Because see, in this world, there's going to be tribulation, there's going to be Nebuchadnezzars, but take heart, I've overcome the world. Now, how did Jesus overcome the world? Because after he says these words, what's going to happen? He's going to be arrested. He's going to be beaten. He's going to be crucified. Is that how you overcome the world? Is that how human revolutions start? What is Jesus doing? He's showing us the upside down nature of God's kingdom versus the kingdoms of men. That Jesus shows up. And what is he doing on the cross? What's happening? He's exposing Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar sees the King of Kings, right? I can take his power. I can take his authority. I can crush him. And on the cross, Jesus becomes the king. I don't know if you realize this. This is how the New Testament sets up the story. Think about it. Where did Jesus get a crown? When? When was he given a crown? When did they put the purple robe? Right? When was he high and lifted up? And he says, when I am exalted, I'll draw all men to myself. When was he given a banner that said the King of the Jews? It's all on the cross. Because see, on the cross, the kingdoms of this world and the way we do things get exposed. And Jesus condemns evil not by condemning us, but by condemning evil in himself. He overcomes the world. Now, it's a paradox, isn't it? It doesn't make sense to us. Just like the teachings of Jesus don't make sense, do they? Hey, listen, if somebody asks you to go 1 mile, what do? Punch him in the face? Curse at him? No, I want you to go 2 miles. 2 miles. Why? That's how I've chosen to overcome the world. I don't want you to hate your enemies. No, I want you to learn to pray for your enemies. Wait, what? They're going to take advantage of me. No, it's going to change your heart. You're going to become the kind of person that actually can change human communities. Because on the cross, we see what Jesus has done by taking the evil of the world upon himself and turning the evil upside down. And this is how Paul described it. This is Colossians 2. This is remarkable. Colossians 2:14. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. And Jesus disarmed the rulers. He disarmed the authorities. He put them to open shame. How? By triumphing over them. Where did Jesus triumph over the world? On the cross. It seems so backwards, but think about this. At this time in Jesus' life and in the life of the history of the world, the Roman Empire was at the height of the legal minds. Up to this point, you think of the legal system of Rome. It was the best legal system at that time. So they had all these laws, these ways of treating people. And then The Jews themselves, they had the history, the ancient history that God's led them through, the grace, the mercy of God, these two kingdoms, the Jewish kingdom and the Roman kingdom. When they saw Jesus, they knew he was innocent. And yet, even though they know he's innocent, what happened? They crucified him. These great systems, the best systems of the world we've come to. And when the Son of Man, the Son of God comes, what do they do to him? They kill him. They crucify him. They know he's innocent. And on the cross, Jesus is exposing the brokenness. He's exposing the wickedness. He's exposing the human condition. And through the cross, through his resurrection, we see God's verdict, that Jesus was victorious over the kingdoms of this world, and he established an eternal kingdom that will not fade. This is the gospel story. We see in Daniel an echo of what is to come. And so what does this have to do with us? How does this help us to be faithful in a time? What does faithfulness to Jesus look like? Well, it doesn't mean reject the culture. It doesn't mean to pull away. It doesn't mean not to be engaged. And it doesn't mean to allow ourselves to be defined by the values of our culture. And it doesn't mean, hey, church, take over the world and make everybody Christian. Living as a disciple of Jesus, it looks very, very different, doesn't it? Following Jesus is hard. Because the nature of his kingdom, it doesn't fit into the kingdoms of this world. It doesn't work the way the kingdoms of this world work, does it? But he's saying, trust me. Just like he's saying to Daniel. Daniel's in a hard position. He's saying, trust me. Believe that I'm at work. Believe that if you follow me and you live out the teachings that I'm giving you, it's going to bring life and freedom, not just to you, but to the entire world. And Jesus says the same thing to us. Don't put your hope in political might and power. It doesn't mean we don't engage and we don't choose. That's not where my hope is found. That I don't believe the problems in the world are going to be solved through these systems. But instead, the problems in the world get solved when Christians get serious about Jesus, serious about following the way of Jesus, by speaking truth to power, and not just truth to power that we disagree with, but truth to power that we agree with. This is how God changes the world. It's the path of faithfulness through the way of Jesus and the kingdom of Jesus. Does that make sense? It's a crazy story, isn't it? And it's so upside down from the way we normally approach. And so as you hear these voices, the voices of the Nebuchadnezzars, can we call them that? And they're different forms of Nebuchadnezzar. I'm not saying everybody's the same. But can we hear the kingdoms of this world vying for power? And can we ask the question, do they reflect the image of God? They're supposed to. And one day God's going to call Republicans, Democrats, our nation, every nation to account. And are we going to have our allegiance primarily towards a nation or a party? Or is our allegiance as we live this life? And we look at our life and we say, hey, this is how I lived. Did our allegiance look more like a nation or did it look more like Jesus? And as we navigate this path, I think one of the areas we need to ask ourselves a question is say, where am I struggling to be faithful? Where is the kingdom of this world influencing me and having power and dominion over me? And what does it look like for me to live in the freedom, which means start by simply naming it, acknowledging, hey, this is how the kingdoms of this world is having greater control. These are the fears that I'm walking in. And what does it look like for us as a community to be honest about those things and then surrender them to King Jesus? That's what our communion time is for. If you didn't grab the communion elements when we came in, I hope you'll do that. They're available up front, and they're also available in the back. And the reason we spend that time in communion together, one, Jesus said, every time you gather, do this in remembrance of me. So as we gather, we want to remember what Christ has done for us through his broken body and his shed blood, that this is the means by which God has rescued us. And so as we hold those elements together, what is God stirring up in you? What does it look like for us as a community to be faithful to Christ? And in what areas do we find that we can't trust him and that we're holding on to the powers of the ways of this world? So let's spend that time together holding the elements, and then after a time of prayer, we're going to receive communion together. Father, I'm reminded those words that Jesus spoke, that he said, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father. For I and the Father are one. Father, when we see your Son, when we see Jesus, we see who we were created to be, how we were created to live, how we were created to engage. We don't see weakness, we see power, might, we see strength. We see strength that is offered up to rescue those who are enslaved by the powers of this world. Powers that on the outside, they look like gold, they look like silver, they look like bronze, they're beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with human kingdoms and nations. But Father, when we put our trust in them, they warp us, they distort us, and we find that our hearts and our lives look less and less like your Son, and more like the world. And so, Father, would you show us those areas in our life today where it's difficult for us to be faithful? And would you help us in the name of Jesus to press in to the beauty and the power of being recreated in the image of God. On the night in which Jesus was betrayed, he took bread. He broke it and gave thanks, and he said, "Take and eat, for this is my body, which is broken for you. Let us receive it together in remembrance of him." And in the same way, after supper, Jesus took a cup, and he said, "This cup, it represents the new covenant that has been established in my blood. That together, as often as we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim the Lord's death until he returns." Prayer team, would you guys come forward? And church, would you please stand? It's good to be with you.
From north to south,
You're so glorious. You're so good and you're so faithful. Jesus, we thank you for that sacrifice that you made on the cross for us. And we never take it lightly, Lord. We thank you for the sacrifice that has offered us eternal life with you. God, thank you for your provision. Thank you for your blessings. We love you and we praise you. In Jesus' name.